The notion was I was writing a movie that kind of could take place anywhere. And so I thought, why not small town Saskatchewan? Because you don't see it very often. And so anyway, I was writing the movie and I was having a hard time making the movie work. It kind of wasn't a big enough story. Felt like it was dragging, and I just kind of felt that it wasn't working as a movie. But what was working was these characters and the dialogue and just, guys standing around in a coffee shop or a gas station being funny. So then I kind of thought it might work as a smaller project. And I was kind of wondering simultaneously what my life would be like if I hadn't pursued show business. And that was kind of the impetus of Corner Gas as a sitcom. If I hadn't pursued show business, I'd probably still be hanging out in my hometown, maybe working at the gas station. And it really was an opportunity to just have these characters kind of stand around and, be conversational, be funny, be quirky, but be these characters. I initially kind of thought that my stand-up would drive the sitcom more, but it was really a different animal. No, the characters don't really come from anywhere. They're just kind of, in a lot of ways, they're just archetypal characters. Everybody knows people like this. And it doesn't matter if you're in, rural Canada or metropolitan Singapore. Odds are, a cranky old guy, right? The authoritarian figures aren't very good at what they do, but they're in charge. They're all kind of archetypal characters, really. And then they just kind of slowly evolved, and life was breathed into them by the actors. And as you're writing, you get to know the characters more, and pretty soon they become real. Like the notion always was with the cops that that the Davis character was going to be kind of, he was a veteran guy, pretty laid back, not really into doing much, and the younger character Karen was a rookie, new, super keen, and was kind of like driving him nuts and always driving things forward. But they just kind of, it was just kind of a case of we saw early on that they could, and we saw this with all the characters, they can all deliver quality comedy. They could all hit a home run if you let them up to the plate. So we just started giving them more and more to do. And, it really, I didn't envision this as a show that had 8 leads initially, but we just came to the realization that, each one of these characters is so good that it's a sin not to use them more, so we ended up just piling them all up and giving them all stuff to do. Oscar in particular was the only one that there was a big change from when I first started writing, because I initially kind of based him on my father, because my father was a funny guy, but he was also a very laid back, mellow guy, and so it doesn't really make for good drama, because it was like two easygoing guys who get along, right? Hey, you want to go fishing? Sure. Well, that's not a particularly good scene, right? So I just kind of thought, well, what if I flipped him on his head and made him complete opposite to what my father was? So completely reactionary, completely against everything. And then the comedy started coming out of that. Well, I threw down quick sketches, right? We had a very talented art department, and we had a guy named Dan Wright who was really skilled at that kind of. So I was able to just kind of do very rough sketches. I wouldn't give myself too much credit for the actual design of things, but I drew a floor plan for the Ruby and the gas station and how they kind of, and I drew the gas station, I drew kind of, this is kind of what it would look like. There's a gas station here and a coffee shop here. But how it looks was really, really, Hugh Shankland was really the guy who came up with that concept. And the Corner Gas logo, I just kind of quickly did a quick drawing of it, and then Dan Wright put it together. So I can't take too much credit, but I've always drawn, and for me it's easy to communicate that way. It's easier for me to go, well, like this, and take a pencil and draw it out and go, that kind of thing. The initial concept was to build the Ruby here and build the Ruby in the city, because then we kind of felt that we would be able to take advantage of wherever we were. If, we wouldn't have to up and move back to the studio to do a Ruby scene if we were out here already. That was kind of the initial logic behind it. It has the exact same footprint, the same measurements, everything about it. But we ended up almost never shooting here. I think we shot 2.5 scenes, Ruby scenes out here. The rest was all done in the studio. So this was kind of, it became, you know, we had this walled off. I had an office over there where I could go sit and write in quiet, and then we had some wardrobe over here, and it kind of became almost a storage facility while we were shooting, because we did all the Ruby stuff, 99% of the Ruby stuff in the studio. But when we came out here, we were scouting this location again for the movie. It was our cinematographer, actually, Ken Krawchuk, who said, you know, we should really take advantage of being in this real environment, seeing out the windows, because we kind of couldn't see out the windows much when we shot in the studio. We had a translite out there, and if you shot directly out the windows, it looked very fake. So we rarely ever looked out the window, and so suddenly it opens things up. It gave Ken more options for how to shoot. You could see corner gas through the window. It just made it more real. Yeah, I mean, the character of my mom, Emma, just didn't exist. The notion was initially that it was my father and I locking horns, because my mother had been the kind of the mediator between the two, and she had passed away, and it forced the father and the son to be together more. That was kind of the initial notion behind it. But we really didn't need that to have the father and son lock horns. And, you know, I always had a great relationship with my mom, and a funny relationship with my mom. She was a strong character, and so I just kind of thought, well, there's no reason really to not have them have a mom in it, and there's potentially a lot more room for humor there. So I just kind of wrote her back in. She is somebody that we all respect so much, and we all love so much. But at the same time, she's one of the gang, you know. She's just a lot of fun to be around, a lot of fun. She has a heart as big as all outdoors. She wears everything on her sleeve, and you know where she stands all the time. And she's just such a dynamic life force, you know, that she's just kind of great to be around. Tisdale's much bigger than Dog River. Tisdale's about 3,500 people. So Dog River is more like, you know, the communities that surround, like Sylvania and Elderslie and Crooked River and, you know, Star City and all these little towns where they would come into Tisdale to get groceries or to, you know, supplies for this or that. And I had in high school, I had dated girls from these little towns, so I spent a lot of time in these little towns. So I kind of knew what life was like there. But at the same time, it's, again, it's pretty universal, you know. Like we had a guy from Sweden say, this is exactly like the village I grew up in. And it played in 26 countries, and people related to it because it is kind of universal in a way. I always said that I wanted to make this a show that happened to take place in small-town Saskatchewan. Not make it about small-town Saskatchewan, and it really isn't. It's about these characters and how they react to each other and the situations they get up to. Most of the stories, if you look at them, really could take place anywhere. Because kind of the theme behind it is, you know, people are more the same than they are different. That's one of the reasons that Lacey comes in from the outside, and aside from the odd cultural wrinkle, she blends in right away. She becomes part of the, because it's kind of a reverse of when I went from rural Saskatchewan to Toronto to pursue stand-up. Aside from some cultural wrinkles, I blended in pretty quickly and easily and made friends and had a great time in Toronto. So it was kind of, you know, in some ways I was looking at it as a reverse. Lacey coming here and blending in pretty well. It just is Canadian. That's why it's Canadiana. But to me, it's the same way. It's like saying, you know, it's like saying, wait, Columbo is a real slice of Americana, wasn't it? You go, well, it's an American show, I guess. It takes place in California, so I guess. But really, it was about that guy. It was about and solving crimes. So aside from the fact that it takes place in Canada, and when they're paying their bill at the Ruby, it's Canadian money. The post office is Canada Post. You know, I think we latch onto it in that regard because there hasn't been a huge amount of successful Canadian television. When people latch onto a show and they like it and they take it to heart, I think they like that it's Canadian. You know, and that kind of becomes part of it just because, hey, this doesn't happen that often. I never really thought much about clean or dirty because I just didn't worry about it much. To me, it was always a matter of being original and funny and clever and, you know, all those things that you're kind of getting paid to provide as an entertainer, right? Like, I have nothing against filthy comedy. I just don't like kind of hackneyed comedy. If it's filthy and overdone, I'm offended. If it's filthy and original, I think it's awesome. It's just that what happens a lot if people are working dirty is it becomes, you know, you can easily use it to shock the crowd, and so oftentimes people get lazy with it. But to me, that's the offensive thing. Like, I grew up as a big fan of SCTV and Saturday Night Live. Once cable came to Tisdale, and my friend Garth McLeod had got cable, and I could go over and watch Letterman and SNL. But I never really participated much in it. I mean, to me, I always knew that from the first time I saw stand-up when I was 12, I knew that that's where I wanted to go. That's the thing that appealed to me most, or connected with me most. When I saw sketches, I was entertained by them. I thought they were great, but I rarely put myself in that position. But when I saw stand-up, I would always imagine myself doing that, walking out in front of a crowd and doing a monologue. So that's for me, it was always stand-up. No, he's very, very similar, and it was a conscious thing. Like, I didn't know, to what degree I would be able to act and do some different character, and I was emotionally within a certain parameter. I think I can make it seem real, but so I just kind of said the smart move here is to make this character as close to me as possible, because then I will know how to react, and when I react to something, it will more likely be real, and the realer something is, usually the funnier it is. And so I didn't want to kneecap my own show by trying to do something that was outside of my scope of ability. So I just thought, make them like me. So I always said, he had a square watch and I had a round watch, or vice versa. At the time, I was wearing a square watch in real life. So I always say I would come in and switch watches, and then it was done.
Hello, Brent here. Hey, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you click that subscribe button, and don't forget to click the little bell notification too. That way you'll always be alerted whenever we're posting a new video. All right then.